Welcome back to another BS review. Today we are reviewing The Defenders on Netflix, and we were very much anticipating this show. We've been hyped for it since, I think, Daredevil Season 1 came out, and we knew that that's what they were trying to do with this.
Yeah, we've watched both Daredevil seasons, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and half of Iron Fist.
Most of Iron Fist, we really gave it our best try.
Iron Fist is not good, and so we quit halfway through and just read a synopsis before watching The Defenders. As with all of our TV show reviews, this will be full of spoilers. We find that that is the best way to review an entire season, so beware if you haven't watched it yet.
So let's jump into it by talking about the characters. Now, obviously, the four Defenders are the standouts of their own shows, and I think they all did a pretty good job here.
Yeah, it was interesting how they had them all interact. It wasn't quite a team, I would say, until maybe towards the end, but even then, they're very resistant to being that team, so I'm really hoping we get more of that in the next Defender season, if we get one.
Yeah, I think there's definitely chemistry there. I think that Jessica and Matt were actually a fun duo to watch. Every time they were on screen just together, there was a lot of good banter, and I think that was my favorite, team up.
I agree, which Jessica's just my favorite character out of all four of them. I really enjoyed their interaction as well. One of the interactions I wasn't quite thrilled by, just because I had higher expectations, was Luke Cage and Iron Fist, because I know that in the comics they're like best buds, which I understand that we're not going to have that right off the bat. However, I don't know, they just lacked friend chemistry.
I think it built over the season, but it's definitely starting really slow. But I think a lot of that is due to the characterization of Iron Fist, which we can get into in a minute, that I think they were just left. It's hard to take a whiny crybaby and make him friends with an emotionally mature, because Luke Cage is the most emotionally calm and mature one out of all four of them.
So let's talk a little more in depth about each character and their kind of arc throughout this season. And let's start with Daredevil, Matt Murdock. He was Arrow and Batman this entire season.
Well, I think we might have differing opinions on this one. I actually thought out of every individual character arc, his was probably the most in-depth.
It had the most development out of all of them, but I just get so tired of the superhero, I have to save everyone and I'm so conflicted about it. I don't know, I get tired of it. I feel like that's all we see in superhero stuff nowadays, especially male superheroes, and I'm just tired of the narrative.
I mean, I would agree. I do think that it has become a trope, and you've seen it in the last seasons of Flash, Arrow, even Marvel Netflix. All of Daredevil Season 2 was spent with him wrestling with that.
Which is why it's not my favorite.
Yeah, so I think it was a little disappointing to see him still struggling with the fact that, dude, you like being Daredevil, just accept it and roll on. And we do see him start to do that by the end of this series.
I do appreciate that he didn't have that quite through every single episode, but I would say it was the bulk of the episodes, and I found it to just be really repetitive. I would have probably been more okay with it if it had been mentioned one or two episodes, and even if it was something that developed over time, but it was just constantly harped on, especially by some of the side characters, which we'll talk about them in a little bit, but it was just constant oh, your old life, and now you're getting back into things, and oh, you need to think about it, and I don't know, it was just,
I agree. It did feel a little bit drawn out compared to the fact that he should have just been after an episode of that, been, you know what, I'm going to be Daredevil and this is how it's going to be. And we never actually really got a moment where he fully came into that and decided. There was one moment where he's talking to Karen and he goes, this is my life. But that's about it, and it wasn't like he was standing up to her. It was more like a, this is my life. Not like a, this is my life and I accept that.
It wasn't a, I'm making a decision. It was a, this is just the way it is and I have to deal with it.
Which I think is the hardest part about Matt's character lately, is that
things happen to him.
Yeah, he doesn't make decisions and do things. He just has things happen to him.
Second up, let's talk about Jessica Jones. She is my favorite out of the four Defenders, and I particularly like her side characters as well. I thought her character arc in this season was pretty well done. It was a little understated for my taste. I wanted her to have a little bit more, but I get why it didn't happen.
I think she's the only one that gets a pass from me because her series in itself is a very noir-styled series, and in that, she doesn't really develop a whole lot. She goes through a lot of shit and deals with a lot of stuff, but as it is, I don't have a lot of complaints about her character
No, I agree.
as who she is, so she doesn't need to change a whole lot or go through a whole lot, and I think she was one of the gems of this whole season.
Yeah, I just really relate to her whole I'm hard and tough and I don't want to care about people, but I do care about people. So the part where she just immediately turns people away and not taking their case, but then, you know, it tugs on her heartstrings and she wants to figure it out and she wants to just get into it. And I really like how they portrayed those two sides of her really well in this season, in my opinion.
Yeah, where she's like, leave me alone, I'm not getting involved in anything. Walks into her apartment, sits down, and starts Googling the case, like, and you're like, okay, Jessica.
Yeah, and I think she ended up caring about the other defenders by the end of it, and just her way of loving on them is the sarcastic remarks and stuff, which, as we mentioned, she did that a lot with Matt, which was really endearing.
Yeah, and I think we even said this in one of the episodes when they were all arguing with each other, where it's like, who expected Jessica to end up being kind of the glue of the team?
Yeah, she was the one who was pretty much like bringing them back together and, yeah, like Steven said, the glue.
Yeah, reminding them, hey, get over your own stuff. Oh, don't walk away, person. Stay here and do this. She was always the person to kind of slip in right when things are about to break and hold them together.
Which surprised me, because I did not expect her to come out as more of the leader, which I wouldn't say any one of them was really the leader of this season, but I think she stood out just a little bit more than the others in that regard.
Yeah, I would say so, which surprised me, because I thought, and typically, like, the way that I expected it to go is that Daredevil would have been the leader in kind of forming this team, but he was actually completely against it almost the entire time. Like,
I thought Daredevil would be the leader and Luke would be the glue.
Yeah, I agree. Because
and that Jessica and Iron Fist would be the kind of live wires and unpredictable people.
Which is true, because the whole time her dialogue, she's saying stuff like that, but she still slips in as like, no, but I'll hold us together and I'll make sure we get this done. Now, Luke Cage this season didn't have a whole lot of character arc going on himself.
Besides his relationship with Claire, I would agree.
But he's never been a character that needed a ton of development. Even in his own series, he didn't really have to conquer any, like, personal obstacles.
Oh, yeah. He
like, emotionally.
He did those mostly in Jessica Jones.
Yeah, and so he's more firm in who he is and how he wants to work. Similar to Jessica, how, like, they didn't shift a whole lot as characters during this season, but they kind of needed to be there for the other characters.
Speaking of Luke's relationship with Claire, I actually really liked their relationship. I thought it was a good continuation of where we left off with them. I do have some complaints about the side characters, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I enjoyed his. Like Steven said, there wasn't just very much going on with him personally, so I don't really feel like I have a lot to say. He was good. He was a part of the team.
Yeah, I enjoyed his banter. Funnily enough, though, he ends up getting knocked out way more often than any of the other characters. For having bulletproof skin and super strength, it seems like he gets knocked out of the picture a lot more.
I will say his strength was something that was played down more in this season, I think, than the other seasons he's been in with Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. I don't know. I feel like he's just always been stronger. You disagree?
No, I don't disagree, which is actually something that I think is one of my biggest complaints about the Defenders as a whole, is that all of their power sets
toned down
were very variable, in that they were very toned down, and then there were moments where they were not, and it doesn't make sense when, like, I think Jessica, which we missed this when we were talking about Jessica, was the biggest perpetrator of this, where sometimes she would struggle to, like, hit a guy and, like, knock him back a foot, and then sometimes she'd grab someone and throw him 20 feet away, and you're like, what? Like, there's one scene she grabs him, throws him into the ceiling like it was nothing, but then she's like, like, what's going on?
Yeah, I find that this season almost seemed afraid to be too superhero-y, which we were discussing this as we watched it, and I feel like that's kind of a trend going on right now, is you don't want to be, like, too much superpowers or anything like that, and I don't know if that's because the creative teams in charge of this are afraid of the whole superhero fatigue, which I think is silly. Give us superheroes, that's what we want, that's why we watch it.
I agree. It seemed almost like they were afraid to say, no, let's let these guys buff up. And part of that is that there's not a whole lot of actual superheroing during this season.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 to 4 major scenes, but that means you're getting like 1 every 2 episodes of them actually doing a significant amount of superhero, like fighting, using their powers.
Which maybe that was on purpose because it wants to focus more on the fact that they're vigilantes over superheroes.
But I think that was also kind of the point, is that they're coming into their heroism. But like we said, Luke Cage also had that with his super strength, where he's the strongest one out of all of them, and sometimes it seemed like he kind of like just struggled to like fight people, like normal ninjas were like fighting him, which is funny because Iron Fist fights him, and he stands there and they just hit him and he does nothing. But then he's fighting a normal guy later, and he's ugh.
So now let's talk about what is, in my opinion, the weakest part of the team, and that is Iron Fist, Danny Rand.
Danny Rand.
I hear he's a really cool guy in the comics, and his character's really awesome, but I just don't see it. I didn't see it in Iron Fist. I don't see it in this.
As I've been reading more Iron Fist this week, it's just so disappointing, the just letdown that his solo series was, but that showrunner Scott Buck just really dropped the ball with his character and who he's supposed to be. And I think they tried to repair this a little bit in the Defenders, and
they also acknowledge it in this season, which is
a lot.
interesting. Which I kind of enjoyed. It made it a little bit more like, you see us, I get it, but like, can you fix it too instead of just comment on it?
And I think that is my biggest complaint about his character, is that they made jokes about it, they commented on it, but I didn't see a whole lot of growth from him.
Like, at one point, somebody says that he's like the worst or weakest Iron Fist they've ever seen. It's like, yes.
And he just goes, "Nah!" and like does his same thing where he just gets really mad and starts punching stuff. And even multiple people just being like, "You're stupid." And he just gets mad, and at no point is like, well, let me take a step back. And it seemed like they were going to go a different direction in episode 3 when he shows up. He's like, you know what, I'm going to take them on legally. But then they just toss it all out the window after that scene.
Now that I'm thinking about it, the 3 male characters in this season all have romantic relationships going on, and Jessica does not, which I don't hate. But Danny and Colleen Wing are just weak. I don't get their chemistry. I don't feel it. I don't see it. It was not my favorite.
Yeah, I feel like, I think a lot of that is on Danny more than Colleen, though.
It's also the writing.
Yeah, it's how they write that. And in general, I think the writing just lets down Iron Fist is the hard part. Is because he has the potential to be such a cool character and to be more of a fun, not super serious and angry all the time. Like, calm, not petulant, because he's supposed to have some discipline. He's supposed to have the anger, but also
anyone
the discipline.
who knows anything about martial arts knows that discipline is such a huge piece of it, and he just seems to have zero. And I'm like, how did you get trained by these amazing monk guys and not have any discipline? It makes no sense.
And it ultimately, I think, just felt like a waste, because I feel like his arc had so much potential where they could have had him coming to some of the terms with, Kunlun disappearing and him feeling bad about that, and having him kind of accept. Because he, at this point, has still not accepted who he is, even though he goes around saying, I'm the immortal Iron Fist.
Oh my god, the amount of times they say that in this damn show. I'm the immortal Iron Fist. He's the immortal Iron Fist. The immortal Iron Fist. Oh my god. It was like every 5 seconds.
So for as much as they say it, I just want him to actually accept it and go, you know what, this is my purpose. And that would have been cool to see. And I even told her at the end, he has so much more powers than just one glowing hand. He should be able to do with his feet, both fists. It would have been cool at the end to at least see him, instead of just doing his one fist, like his whole arm start glowing and like do something really cool. And it just, unfortunately, I think his arc felt like a waste for how much they focused on Kunlun and the hand.
So now let's talk about the side characters, which we won't go into quite as much depth about them, but they were not well done.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people saying they really liked the side characters in this, but...
Did you watch the other seasons of things? Because most of them are way better in those seasons. I will say I liked Trish and Malcolm from Jessica Jones. They were both fine in the capacities they were in the show. I liked them both. But Claire and Colleen were some of my absolute least favorites.
Yeah, it ultimately felt like, and we said this while we were watching, that it's like they took all these three-dimensional characters from their shows, and in order, for the sake of time and simplicity, smushed them all down into one-dimensional characters. So, Colleen goes from angry martial artist who hates the hand, but also is learning things with Danny and fighting them, to Danny's girlfriend.
And babysitter.
Yeah. Claire goes from being the glue of the Defenders and everything, and being the foundation for everyone, to Luke's girlfriend.
Yeah, she in the past has, supported all of these characters, and really she was just diminished to Luke's girlfriend. That's all she was, is someone that Luke was sleeping with. And I was really disappointed by how those girls were just boiled down to their relationship status. We got a little bit with Colleen and her old master, but other than that, even that part was weak. I felt like her character was very whiny throughout the entire season. That's all she ever did was complain.
She was either crying or whining most of the time, almost like 90%. And in fact, I felt like that's what most of the characters did.
Mm-hmm.
Misty Knight, who I really liked in Luke Cage, felt like she was just bitching the entire show. Why aren't you guys looping me in? I'm gonna get in your way. If you're not looping me, I'm upset. And it's like, stop. Like, that's not how your character necessarily always was before.
And Karen reverted back to, like, Daredevil Season 1 Karen, which I don't enjoy her character in Season 1, but Season 2 she's a lot better. But oh my god, all she talks about is Matt and how she's disappointing. He's going back to things and, like, she just seems so conflicted about this, and that's all she does the entire time we see her is complain to Matt or to Foggy about how she's just really disappointed and she tried talking to him and it's just so sad and ugh.
Yeah, I know that all of their lives revolve around their respective superpowered or, superhero friends, but it just felt like so much of it was unneeded. And I think that's the hard part, is when the side characters start feeling like filler, not like they're actually integral to the actual plot. And I think that got especially bad near the last couple episodes, where they were clipping to the police department in the middle of the final battle, to the police department to hear Karen and Trish talk about something. And it's like, it's just so unnecessary at this point. No one cares when they're doing their big battle what's going on with the side characters at that point. And if you do, I'm sorry, but, like, I don't.
I just didn't like how they clipped it. I think if they had kept those scenes just inserted differently, but like Steven said, in these big battle scenes throughout the entire season, they were constantly having, like, 30 seconds of battle and then clip to something else. And it's like, but go back.
Yeah, it didn't feel like they completed the Defender storyline because they were too busy clipping away to all the side characters, and in a way it felt like they were standing in the way of the plot a lot more than they were helping it along.
And in continuing with talking about our characters in the show, we're going to talk about the villains, which are the Hand from the Five Fingers of the Hand, pretty much, which we got a little more explanation of that. Sigourney Weaver,
she started out really cool.
She did. I really liked her. I liked how she was portrayed, and the way they ended her storyline, it felt like you were, like, building up to something and climaxing to something, and then it just stopped. Like, it never got there, and I was really disappointed. I feel like they wasted her talent, honestly. I think that she can do a lot better, and they should have given her way more badassery.
Yeah, the fact that they had Sigourney Weaver, and she was great in the scene she was in.
She just wasn't given much to work with.
But they just never took her character any place where she could fulfill, like, Sigourney, notorious for being a very action-packed actor and not afraid of doing more physical scenes. And they just didn't use her like that. It was weird.
Well, and I would have been okay even if they had kept with the not using her for physical scenes. But even besides that, I just felt like, I don't know, it seemed like she had this big plan and this whole thing going on, and then it just kind of crumbled, lacklustery.
Yeah, and we were talking about this too, that there's also a thing going around in superhero shows where you have this big bad villain
who doesn't do anything.
Here's what happens is they talk a lot of game. They talk a big game, like, I'm the scary person. And then the people under them go, oh, they're very scary. And then all the superheroes go, wow, they're super dangerous and so scary.
But they don't do anything to be scary.
But at no point, they never do anything. Like, Sigourney never kills 500 people, and that's the difference between, like, Kingpin and David Tennant's Purple Man, who, in the previous scenes of Jessica Jones and Daredevil, because they actually do things. At one point, David Tennant gets mad about something and he goes, okay, all of you dead. People die every episode in Jessica Jones from him
cool
just
villains.
Like, dead. And so when he talks, you listen because you go, oh gosh, what is going to happen now? But it got to a certain point where when Sigourney started to monologue, where you just stopped caring because you go, you literally have done nothing.
And the Hand in general was pretty weak, in my opinion, for a villain group that has spanned across several seasons of show now. I feel like they've just never really gone anywhere. Like, yeah, we got something towards the end and it kind of explained why they were trying to do things, but again, they just don't do much. Like, they were supposed to completely destroy New York, which of course they're saved from doing, but even leading up until that point, they didn't do anything in between. Like, there wasn't any major deaths, there wasn't like this huge nefarious plot. I don't know.
Yeah, they really didn't seem like they had it together. And in fact, a lot of the scenes with the Hand are them talking about how they don't have a plan. And yeah, it's like, what's going on? What do we do? And take, for example, Daredevil Season 1. There's a whole episode where he fights a ninja named Nobu. And he works for the Hand, and it's crazy. And he almost kills Matt. He puts like a giant hook through his chest, and he wrecks him. So his boss is in this, who leads the Hand, and he's one of the fingers, and there's a certain point where Daredevil fights 2 fingers of the Hand. The guy who trained that guy and another one who's a master martial artist.
And it's nowhere near as cool.
At the same time. In the dark, mind you, but yeah, like he fights them both at the same time and he makes it look super easy. And that was just weird. They for how much presence they should have had, it was like Sigourney. They never did anything.
And I expected this to have a lot of like stakes. Like, yeah, I know New York was at stake, but I never felt it. Like, I just feel like a lot of the season was them telling us things, but not giving us space to feel it or anything like that. In fact, I do think a lot of the dialogue and exposition in the show treated its audience like idiots. They constantly repeated things, and not only repeated things just within the season, but constantly called back to things that were in previous seasons, which I understand that they're trying to cater to people who didn't watch those other seasons, but at the same time, it was too much, in my opinion.
There's a way to naturally do that, and then there's having a character go, well, that time that happened, remember, I did this afterwards, and that's why you're doing that, and you should not.
And then, like, an episode later, they have a same reference back to that situation. It's just like, stop. I just felt like the dialogue was so lazy, and not even just mostly the dialogue. It was just repetitive constantly. I was like, every time they mentioned something, I'm like, yeah, you've told us that 3 times. Okay.
And I think that's one of the big problems with these villains is that they're so exposition heavy, is they do so much talking and not enough showing. Mm-hmm. Now, we've already started talking about it quite a bit, but the plot struggled. I think that was probably the weakest element of this season, is not necessarily the performances by anyone, but the plot. It never really took anyone anywhere that exciting.
The only part that I found kind of exciting was the very last episode when it does reveal the place that they're in and where they're harvesting this material that they need for them to be long-lasting, immortal, was the same place that Danny fought the dragon, and you even see the dragon bones. That was like one of the coolest parts of the whole season, but that was it.
Yeah, I felt like for all the build-up, it didn't go as far as I wanted it to. And I think that goes back to the stakes, is that throughout this, a lot of people kept telling us this big war for New York and the stakes, but the plot and the pacing of the plot really felt off. For example, I think one of the worst examples of this is in episode 3, they get to the Chinese, or it was actually episode 4, they get to the Chinese restaurant after escaping Midland Circle, and you stay there for 50 minutes of exposition. They literally just sit down at this table and talk. Nothing else happens. They have a battle start at the end of the episode, but the whole time it's literally people just going, this is why this is, and this is why they're bad, and this is what we need to do, and it just felt so slow.
Yeah, it's interesting now that we're talking about it, because I feel like when we finished the season, we were like, oh yeah, we enjoyed that. But critically, it wasn't great. Plot, villains, characters, all of the above. Speaking of the ending part, we have a huge piece that happens with Matt and Elektra, which, speaking of side characters, and women who are just relegated to being girlfriends, Elektra and Matt's storyline was so aggravating to me. Not only because the whole time, anytime Elektra is mentioned to Matt, she is always referenced as your ex-girlfriend about 20 times in 8 episodes. Like, stop, we know, you can say Elektra. And the fact that they were doing that was just pinpointing it to, this is all she is. She is just an ex relationship. It doesn't matter what else she does. It doesn't matter what else she's doing. That's it. That's what she's demeaned down to.
And I think the most unfortunate part of her emerging as the final antagonist after killing Sigourney 3 episodes from the end and taking over the main villain role is that it wasn't anything that didn't already happen. In her going back to being Elektra, just more evil, we've already seen that in season 2 of Daredevil. Mm-hmm. That was the entire season arc with her, of that struggle between Matt trying to pull her to the light and her trying to pull him towards the darkness, and that struggle. And I think they ended it pretty well with her death. And so the fact they brought her back, and instead of doing something new or different, it felt lazy that they just decided to say, let's do that again. It was essentially a rehash of season 2's plot. They just gave it it was like watching an alternate ending on a DVD. But instead of it ending with her dying, it ended with them both dying.
Yeah, which, let's talk about that. So Matt ends up dying, and we all know that he's not dead. Like, come on, they're not going to kill off Daredevil. And so the whole team is like sad about it, whatever. And like Luke even says this thing towards the end to Jessica, which I thought was in really poor taste and kind of out of character for Luke. Maybe you disagree with me, but where he's like, I'm really sad that he died, but I'm glad it wasn't you. And I'm just like, that's harsh, man. Like, I didn't expect that out of him.
I agree. I think it would have been more like him to say something like, I'm glad that some of us were able to make it. Not to just like trash Daredevil and be like, I'm glad it wasn't you. Glad it was him.
I expected them to be much more of a team by the end of it, and I felt like it just wasn't. I didn't get the sense that they were the Defenders together. Like, they all just kind of happenstance fell into something that made them together, and...
Which I feel like is it's a lazy plot move for superhero arcs, because the trope is, it's like trying to copy the Avengers, but doing a worse job. But you even see this in like the CW team-ups, now that they have all those different superheroes, is that you have them come together and you want there to be a little bit of conflict, because then they can grow closer and overcome that. But I don't think they needed to spend a whole season. It would have been a little bit more fun to see them overcome that in the first couple episodes.
I agree.
And then spend a good 6 episodes kicking ass together.
And still have conflict or things that go on within that, but still have it overwhelmingly be them being a team. And
up until the very end, they bickered, even up till the very final battle.
Well, and even after the end, they all kind of split their ways and whatever. Like, no one... I don't know.
Yeah, it felt like they could have left it a little bit more intertwined, and it felt like the conclusion just didn't fulfill everything that I wanted it to.
Well, and of course we see that Matt is in fact alive. He's fine. Everything's okay. So it's kind of like, well, I didn't really understand the point of him dying and then them like being sad about it and all the characters being sad about it. And like, my question is, when they get back to the police precinct, why did no one go talk to Karen and Foggy? Why did they just leave them by themselves in a corner
to be upset when no one walks in?
That Matt didn't walk in. Like, all of y'all are giant dicks. Like, I just...
Which at least like someone like Jessica would have walked over and just been like... And walked over and been like, I'm really sorry.
And she did not. I just felt
like
that was really
on.
out of character. And I just don't understand why that happened. And then we have a whole bunch of like kind of where they're at now and where they're going off to. And then we see that Matt's alive. And I'm like, okay, I think it would have been better to actually leave it till Daredevil
where he's dead
season
and
3 or something. And
which I even said, I was like, well, he was in the Shaolao area, so really, what if that portal closed off and he just had to get back from Tibet? And you could have just ended it with you thinking he was dead and then coming back to New York City later with like a beard or something cool, having traveled and come to peace with his like internal demons. Like, that would have been a fun idea.
Which, who knows, maybe they'll still do that because we don't know where he was when he woke up.
Some sort of Catholic monastery.
Who knows?
But I think the worst part about the ending that really made me mad is Daredevil's dead. You think they've closed everyone out, and they're on a rooftop, and you see this dark figure overwatching the city in the same pose that Daredevil does when he's like listening and watching.
And it's fucking Danny.
And then like for no reason at all they do this, and then your teacher like, oh gosh, is it him? And then a fist glows up. It's just Danny, and then it cuts away, and you're like, why did they do that other than to just like fake you out for a second and be like, fuck you? Like,
overall, I just feel like this whole season was really disrespectful to audiences. It was not treating us like we're smart, not treating us like we can piece things together, and stuff like that, cheap tricks like that, is just, it adds no substance to the story. It just messes with you, and because of that, it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. I'm just going to be constantly like, oh, I don't believe anything. Like, I was never worried that Daredevil was dead. I didn't even think that when Danny was on the roof like that. I never thought it was Daredevil. I was like, oh, it's somebody else, and they're just freaking us out, and sure enough, I don't know, it just felt like lazy writing.
Yeah, I think for a show that is only 8 episodes long, I was surprised at how unnecessary a good 40% of the show was.
There's so much filler for such a short season.
And the fact that they tried to maintain such a slow burn pacing for what should not be that way. And if you look at their shining example of, say, The Avengers, is half of that the first 20-30 minutes are a little slow, but after that it's a wild ride from start to finish. And this didn't feel like a wild ride. It felt like a kiddie ride. It felt like it had a couple fun moments, but I was just confused really by the end of it. So I know we just said a lot of negative stuff, and we did like this season, and I'm glad that they finally put out The Defenders. I think it just feels like a lot of wasted potential, and I think that's the hardest part with a show like this, is you get so excited, and if it doesn't, and it fell a lot short, not even just a little short, quite a bit in a lot of areas.
I think if something like this season had come out before we had any of our other seasons, we would have enjoyed it a lot more. But after we've seen that they can do so much better with the other characters in the other seasons, you expect it when they all come together to be even that much more epic, and it was not even just okay. It was pretty below par.
Yeah, it felt like Jessica and Daredevil especially were stepping into a subpar, their own series, just if it was less good.
Yeah, it's really disappointing because I feel like we started off really strong with this whole storyline of seasons with Daredevil and Jessica Jones. I think those are the 2 strongest seasons, maybe even Daredevil season 2. But from there, it's just kind of gone downhill. Luke Cage was okay. Iron Fist is bad. This was maybe a little better. It was better than Iron Fist.
It was definitely better. Yeah, it was definitely better. It was watchable and still enjoyable. Just there were so many huge flaws that at the end you can't help but be a little disappointed.
But let us know what you thought about this. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Do you agree with any of our points? Do you disagree? Please let us know. We want to talk to you guys about it. That's why we have this channel, is to discuss things with you. And if you like our review videos, please give us a thumbs up down below. And if you want to see more from us, please subscribe. We have a lot of different content, including movie reviews, TV show reviews, discussions, top ranking things, all
sorts
of
of
the
stuff.
above. Yeah, so if you want to check out some of those, we will have some of them linked over there. And we will see you in our next video. Bye.